Hey friends, you've come to the right place. I'm Chloe Radcliffe. I'm your co-host for today's breakfast, and I'm coming to you from New York City. I'll be emceeing the program, and I'll be facilitating some questions coming from you out in the audience to our speaker today. So throughout the program, be thinking about questions you want to ask. And I also want to encourage you to post on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, any of your thoughts about today's meeting. Get them up there. We want to hear them. We're going to be starting the breakfast soon, and in the meantime, use the chat to send us your name and where you're joining us from.
Most people agree the difference between surviving and thriving in business today is good leadership. But what exactly is good leadership? Good leadership is the art and science of people working together to create great results. You see it when leaders with good character multiply their impact with proven success habits. Great results happen when people work together and create a positive impact on their customers, colleagues, and their communities. Good Leadership is also a game-changing consulting firm headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Unlike other firms who coach individuals, Good Leadership coaches teams to exceed their goals, both personally and professionally. The firm's mission is to spread the idea goodness pays. What's goodness? Goodness in business is when people thrive together in a culture of encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork. Good leadership coaches accelerate alignment in teams during disruptive changes in the business, and they bring out the goodness in people with a proven process called the Goodness Pays Leadership System. It's worth your time to learn more because leading with goodness is confirmed by research to produce better business results. The secret is here in this exceptional book, How Goodness Pays. So if you want to explore new ways to produce better results faster, visit goodleadership.com. Watch for a goodness dinner near you, or get tickets to a Good Leadership Breakfast series. It's an exciting workshop held only in Minneapolis 8 times a year.
Hello from New York City, and congratulations for investing in yourself as a good leader who radiates goodness. I'm Chloe Radcliffe. I'm your co-host today. And I want to be the first to say that we're really looking forward to being back in the ballroom in Minneapolis, St. Paul in 2022. And we're enjoying broadcasting the breakfast content all over the internet, so you can expect a hybrid approach early next year. Today's meeting is the first of 3 this fall, and the others are coming in October and November. Now, it is my pleasure to toss it over to the founder and creator of this event, a thought leader in the executive coaching industry whose firm Good Leadership is creating the category of executive coaching, Paul Batz. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Chloe. It's really been fun broadcasting with you, and it's kind of cool that you're still doing this from your apartment in New York City.
Absolutely.
And to make it even better, we actually have a few friends here live in the studio audience today, and that just adds that extra energy. Today is actually our 92nd breakfast, which means we've been doing this for more than 11 years now. We're committed to this format for the rest of the year, and we're also, like you said, looking forward to getting back in the ballroom in March of 2022. So it goes without saying, but thank you very much for staying with us. We think it's important to continue this breakfast, to spread our belief that goodness pays, and also to share our point of view about good leadership. Because if you look at leadership in the media today, there's an unrealistic emphasis on individual leaders. The magazines all emphasize a big idea approach and also a pull yourself up by your bootstraps ideology. What we read and see over and over again is an individually focused leadership dialogue that we call the superhero model. In some ways, we're playing right into this by interviewing just one leader about good leadership. But we try really hard to expand the subject beyond the individual because we all know that nothing significant ever happens alone. We believe that when the team at the top is not aligned, everyone suffers. So we focus the coaching, the tools, and the research on how good leaders accomplish great things with their teams. Today's meeting features Duchesne, the president of Minnesota Public Radio. Duchesne joined NPR during a global pandemic just before the events surrounding the death of George Floyd. He agreed to speak today because he believes in our mission of spreading goodness, and he embraces the idea that good leadership is a team sport. Today's theme is thriving together. So to get started, Duchesne, will you please tell us, so where do you find the joy in your job at NPR today?
In lots of places, Paul. You know, I think when we get to the point that we're actually executed things we spent weeks or months on, it really pours out, right? So we had NPR Day at the fair, you know, a week ago, and it was awesome to see something that we'd spent months, you know, dreaming up on stage, and people in the audience dancing, you know, little kids dancing, folks quite a bit older than I am dancing, just tapping their feet, enjoying the moment. And whether it's something like that where we're out in community, or it's great programming that's going out over the airwaves, or just knowing, you know, through our website how much information is available to people, that we're producing content that people value, and none of that happens by accident. And it's to your point, it's a team sport. Lots of people pour into the work that we do.
It's certainly a demanding time. What do you do outside of work to, you know, recharge and stay positive?
I have a pretty good list of things. I like to bike. It's probably my favorite activity. I don't bike in the heart of winter, but I bike for most of the year. I feel like I'm 12 again when I'm out on the trail. Often I do it with friends. I read quite a bit, and it's both to grow, but also for inspiration and relaxation. And I enjoy eating, drinking, and just hanging around. You can find me in my backyard, neighbor's backyard, often just with no agenda, just kind of taking it easy and kind of de-stressing.
And it's football season. I know you like sports too.
I love sports.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Well,
it's
thanks for sharing. That's a good teaser. It's been nice getting to know you.
I've enjoyed it as well.
Good.
Yeah, I agree. Duchesne, I bike everywhere in New York City, and whenever anybody asks, how did you get your start? I just say the Twin Cities. It's the best biking city. I can't wait to get to the full interview shortly.
So, building up to today, we surveyed leaders like you on topics related to executive team alignment, mainly because we all know, I said this earlier, when the team at the top is not aligned, everyone suffers. So Chloe, will you read the first survey question that we did and share the results?
Yep, absolutely. We received hundreds of responses to this survey, and the first question is, thinking about life since the pandemic, do you think your primary team has improved alignment, stayed the same, or reduced alignment? And we see numbers here: improved alignment 22%, stayed the same 50%, and reduced alignment 28%. Paul, what do you see here?
Well, it's good to know that half of the executive teams have found ways to maintain that alignment. And while 22% have improved, it's also interesting to note that more teams actually than that, almost a third, feel that their alignment is now worse since living and working in the pandemic. It's really important that we think about team alignment more as a waterfall that's always flowing, rather than a faucet that gets turned on and off. It's a process that good leaders do rather than an event. The highest performing teams we see are constantly checking and rechecking and agreeing on priorities. They're measuring their progress and course correcting to make sure everybody wins together. So Chloe, that leads us to the next survey question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the image of a waterfall versus a faucet. And this ties into that. How often does your team, this is the second question, how often does your team schedule time specifically to work on improving the cohesiveness and performance of the team? And you can see the data in front of you. The data here shows that 59% of teams meet at least once a quarter, and that is the waterfall approach. They are keeping up a regular cadence. The 18% who never meet have the faucet shut off, and the 2% annual and 21% when we think we need it responses just don't turn the faucet on very often. They are not in the waterfall category.
Yeah, when I first saw this data, it's also fascinating to me how this matches some of the other information we've collected over the last 10 years of good leadership, and that is that less than 60% of teams hit their goals on a regular basis. And I know it's hard for people who are now working from home to sit through team meetings. But this data suggests we need to keep making those meetings happen. It's really important to hitting our goals.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we all know that working from home and virtual meetings it's one of those dynamic topics where opinions can change from day to day, hour to hour. We all have a different opinion, but we do all want to be on a winning team, however that happens, and that means working together. Speaking of working together, the growth of the Good Leadership Breakfast would not be possible without the generous support of sponsors, and I'm excited to introduce our sponsors today for today's breakfast. Today, our featured sponsors are Twin Cities Orthopedics and Robert Half, so let's see their sponsor messages.
Good morning. I'm Aaron Johnson, CEO of Twin Cities Orthopedics, and I'm happy to be here welcome you to this morning's Good Leadership Breakfast. TCO is one of the nation's largest independent orthopedic practices with just over 120 orthopedic surgeons and 1,700 employees. With nearly 40 locations, TCO not only serves the Twin Cities metro area, but has become a destination orthopedic provider for patients throughout the country. At TCO, we feel strongly that our Be the Difference culture is what sets us apart from our competition. And that's why we continue to work with and promote good leadership in their breakfast series. We believe that spreading goodness is more important than ever before, which is why TCO is excited to continue to partner with Good Leadership Enterprises to help them spread their message of how goodness pays. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing all of you in person soon.
Hello, I'm Kathy Northamer, District President at Robert Half, the world's first and largest specialized talent solutions firm. Robert Half is proud to once again sponsor the Good Leadership Breakfast Series, as we believe leading with goodness has been essential to our 73-year history. Our founder, Bob Half, was guided by an ethics-first philosophy which continues today as a core value for our employees around the world. In my 20 years as a leader at Robert Half, I've seen firsthand how goodness creates a positive impact in the way our employees work with each other, with our clients, and the job seekers we serve. The foundation of good leadership is leading by example. When we approach every decision with goodness, it creates an environment rich with collaboration and productivity that creates great results for everyone we work with, from our colleagues to our communities. As we all learned last year, the pandemic impacted companies and its workers in so many ways, and as leaders, we faced unique and critical challenges. Navigating those unprecedented times solidified Robert Half's commitment to leading with goodness, and I'm sure you felt the same. We hope the Good Leadership Breakfast Series will continue to inspire all of you to focus on the good and creating a culture of positivity.
Yeah, well, I'm inspired by the sponsors who stuck with us, and we really appreciate the continued support and the dedication to this Good Leadership Breakfast. We just couldn't do it without you. And now it's time to hear more from Duchesne Drew. So remember now, you have the opportunity to send in questions for Duchesne, which Chloe will curate, and she may ask your question after the break. So just type them into the chat bar on the right-hand side, and we will get to those in a little bit. So Duchesne, when you and I first met, you told me that you grew up in New York City, and maybe you didn't quite understand the Minnesota nice thing quite so much. So what were 2 or 3 of your pivot points from New York City to get to leading NPR here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul?
I mean, the first one was just being willing to go someplace new and not foreign, but very different.
Mm-hmm.
I was just excited. You know, I was in grad school at Northwestern and journalism school, and I just wanted to get to a place where I could learn how to be a better reporter. Mm-hmm. And the Star Tribune gave me an opportunity to be a summer intern, and I leapt at it. And then I figured I can do 10 weeks anywhere. And it's been like more than 25 years, right? So just being open to what's possible when you take the leap. The second sort of pivot point was I actually left the Star Tribune and went to the Dallas Morning News after a few years and got recruited back to the Star Tribune into a leadership role, and was coming back initially as a reporter, but the deal I cut with Tim McGuire, who was the editor of the paper at the time, was that he wanted me to become a leader in the organization. Okay. That was his goal. It wasn't mine initially, to be frank. But I trusted in him enough and believed in myself enough that I'd be able to kind of make that leap too. It wasn't what drew me to journalism. I actually wanted to be a reporter my entire life, but as I got more invested in sort of the health of the organization and understood what was possible for me and for the organization and community through me, I got more excited about the possibilities. The third was that jump 6.5 years ago now to the Bush Foundation. I had a chance to work with some really talented community-focused people and do grant making. And I moved differently across the region than I had as a reporter, as a journalist, and learned just a ton about other parts of the state, met a lot of other leaders across the state, really broadened my understanding of what this place is, and really deepened my own skill when it came to working across difference and my own appreciation for what equity looks like in other settings. And so when the NPR job came up, for me it was this great combination of media. It's still what drives me is helping people understand the world around them, but also this sense of what we can do in community, for community, with community. And it was a good sort of, for me, a thread of the leadership skills I'd built, the network I had built, and this sort of sense of what Minnesota could be if we could help us see each other more clearly.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's common throughout this history of the breakfast is no one's ever sat in that chair and said, oh, it was a straight line. I wanted this job when I was a kid.
No.
Yeah, and so it's always a curvy path. And on that path, leadership, like anything else, is all about context. And so, we've discovered in our research today that part of that context is this thing that we call the dark noise. We're kind of overwhelmed by just this polarized dialogue that's happening in the media, and it's driven largely because people are telling us through research, mainly the Pew Research Organization, that Americans in particular are losing trust in the four major institutions that used to knit us together. That's government, big business, organized religion, and the media. Yep. So you guys are the media and a little bit of government. And so how are you rebuilding trust in NPR in this context?
Yeah, we're trying to give people a peek behind the curtain just so they can understand how the news and information we provide, how it comes together. It's what you hear on NPR News, what you find on our website, is not coming from somebody sitting in their shorts in the basement making stuff up.
Yeah.
It might be in their shorts in the basement because everybody's working at home because of the pandemic, but they're working diligently to get it right, to provide context. They've got a team of editors, producers, and other serious, skilled, dedicated journalists working with them to make sure that what we're producing is accurate, is balanced, is thoughtful. And the other, I think, important to mention is you're not going to get anything that's complicated. You're not going to get all in any one story. So really being thoughtful about your coverage plan so that you can have different perspectives and different dimensions of a story covered over time. We're really committed to doing that.
Well, so know your audience is kind of an axiom in business, but you actually have an audience.
Right.
And so I'm really curious about this as the society is so polarized left and right. How are you guys going about audience development in that in that polarization?
Well, part of it is certainly we have an audience insights team. We're trying to understand what people value, what they want to know, and we don't have any expectation that every single person who comes to us is going to like everything they hear. Sometimes you don't like the opinion of someone who's just expressing their own thoughts, right? But we definitely try to create space where lots of different kinds of people feel like their perspectives are being represented fairly, accurately, and we definitely try to add the kind of context that gives people who maybe don't have that experience themselves deeper appreciation for the stories of other people and a better sense of how we got to now.
Well, and there certainly is a lot of vibrant things on either side of the spectrum these days to report on, and so you don't have to go looking for stories all that often these days, right?
No, there's a lot.
Yeah.
So if anything, it's like, of the many things, the challenge is what's the most important thing, right? And how to get it right in the sense of how to tell in ways that are going to help people better understand how we got to now. And I think a big part of it is this sense of agency that we should all get if we're really engaged in staying on top of things.
Yeah. So when we talk about goodness, you saw in the video, and we've talked about this a number of times, goodness around here is about thriving together. And when you think about your team, what are some of the core expectations that you have for that team to create business results, together? And sort of where did you learn that style?
Yeah, for me, my focus with the team is many of them, to be frank, have expertise and skills and history that I don't have. So my goal isn't to have all the answers when I sit down with them. It's to make sure we're having the best conversations we can have. Are we identifying opportunities and challenges? Are we invested in each other's success? It's a shared success model, right? So I have to care about you hitting your numbers, trusting you care about me hitting my numbers. And when problems bubble up, I need to see you as someone who's going to help me figure it out, right? And that's the culture I'm driving at NPR.
Well,
we need to be in it together.
You mentioned in one of our conversations that the guy who runs the current radio station reports up to you. So what can you just help us understand what some of the different kind of channels are that are a part of your team? Sure,
it's pretty broad. So there's NPR News, there's a Current, which is an alternative music station. I say it alternative in the sense that it's not commercial, right? And we're all public media, so it's about music exploration across a wide dimension of taste within music. It's the classical station as well, your classical NPR. And then we do events, and we have members. I imagine some of the folks watching there are members of NPR. We have someone who manages that. We have underwriting, which is sort of like our form of advertising, so revenue, right? And we have folks focused on everything from finance to HR to on and on and on and on, right? We've got a lot of moving pieces. We have a special initiative called Little Moments Count that's focused on early childhood development and brain development. So, which feels like an odd thing, but it's another form of community service. So when we're sitting down to figure out, how to get from where we are as an organization to where we want to be, everyone's invested in how we're growing and serving and understanding as part of that our audiences, right? Both the people we have and the people we're hoping to serve. And we've got to, only we're going to serve them is to be of more interest and be more relevant to them. So a lot of our time is spent trying to understand how to do what we're doing in a way that's going to pull more people in.
Well, that's a steep learning curve to learn all those different things coming into it, mainly as a reporter. Obviously, you've got lots of life experiences. Let's talk a little bit about teams. So at Good Leadership, we have a team model that we call epoxy theory. And epoxy is pretty easy to understand. It's two chemicals that do nothing by themselves until you put them together. Right. The way we think about it is that one chemical is this thing we call relationship capital. And then the other one is structural integrity. And teams need both. And so with your permission, we interviewed a couple of people who report to you and just asked them to talk about your style and how you go about things. And they told us, while you're a very personable guy and easy to get along with, that your style really is structural in terms of how you think about leading teams. So I'm curious now for you to describe for us, how do you apply that structural mindset to make sure your team is prepared and doing what they say they're going to do?
Some of it's about being consistent. So we meet as a team on a weekly basis. And then I have one-on-ones with my direct reports at least every other week. The one-on-ones are set every other week, and if they need additional time, then we can schedule that too. In those meetings, there's some time spent catching up, how the kids kind of stuff, but most of it is going to be focused on how are we coming on X, Y, or Z projects. And some of that is specific just to their team, and some of that's specific to our broader goals, as our shared goals, right? And so a lot of the time we spend this kind of a rotation. We do a round robin once a month, so everybody has a chance to kind of speak into the room what the big things coming are. We have folks go through and do presentations on projects that they're working on that their colleagues need to know about. We go through and we have folks from other parts of the org that aren't part of my team come in and present on things we need to know about. And we spend time on strategic planning at key points in the year, and then updates for how those are going. And a lot of that work actually happens outside of that team meeting because different subgroups are working on it. But a lot of it is about, what's the information we need to share, and what are the problems bubbling up, what are the opportunities bubbling up that we should be talking about, who in this room would benefit from and contribute to this conversation.
So there's a lot of planning that goes into how, what gets on the agenda and how the team's going to cover those things?
Definitely, and the agendas go out, oftentimes they go out with a few ideas, and then people add to them, right? So it's meant to be, it's not just me driving in that regard. I'm not the only one who has ownership of what we're going to talk about. I really try to create an environment where everybody feels a sense of ownership in a good way for what we're going to do with our time together.
So who's the arbiter of what gets on the agenda and who doesn't?
In the end, I guess it's me.
Okay.
But I think if you were to ask my folks, they would tell you that if they have something they want on the agenda, we find a way to get it. And if not that week, then maybe the next week. But it's our agenda. Homer just has to type it up.
Okay, well, this is a good time to remind people that you can ask questions of Duchesne. Just put them into the chat bar, and we'll get to them here in a second. So this is one of my favorite parts of what we're doing these days, and this is about the idea of success habits. So part of our mission is to pass on success habits to aspiring leaders. And the way we think about it is a success habit. It's something that you've learned to do over and over and over again because it really works. And I'm particularly interested in why you do these success habits, and then a little bit of the how, because we're going to capture this and distribute it through our client base. I'll write about it next week, and everybody that's listening can get that as well. We interviewed a couple of your people, and they identified 3 success habits that they really admire in how you operate. And these are the kind of things that they said if they had to jump up to the next level tomorrow, they would use these techniques because they think they really work. So the first one they talked about was your biweekly meetings. You have a very structured agenda, and it's organized around vision and goals. So tell us, why do you think that's important, and then exactly how do you do that?
So a couple of ways. One is, we have an annual setting of these goals. So everybody knows what they are. They're written down. They're agreed upon. So I actually have that at the top of the file that I'm sitting with. So when I'm meeting with folks, whether it's in person or virtually, I usually have my iPad open and I have a file open, and it's the file for Paul, and within that I've got
Very
Paul's.
structural right
it's
there.
structured.
Yep, that's
I've
right.
got Paul's responsibilities, and it's shared, right? I've got those responsibilities too. So
Yep.
it's making sure we're talking about that. I've also got within that same file anything that's popped up in the preceding days that I wanted to make sure I was asking you or telling you about, so that I didn't have an opportunity to sort of make sure we're syncing. So I actually, throughout the week, I'm dropping into the various files from my team members and adding notes, things I have to make sure we're talking about before our time ends, because it goes quickly. And I just think it's the best way to make sure you don't forget to do the main thing.
Yeah, good. Well, that seems awfully simple, but we know from our experience as coaches that doesn't happen nearly as often as you might think. So that's number one. The second success habit, I think, is really, really important, and that is that you use an outside-in stakeholder perspective to measure the success of the team. So let's talk about why you think that's important and how you do it, how you go about it.
Yeah, when we don't exist for our own self-actualization. We're there to serve the community. It's public media. So, we've got to be focused on, are we creating content, experiences that the community values and that they will grow from? And there are ways to measure that. Are people tuning in, right? Or are they tuning away, right? Are they becoming members, right? Are they supporting us financially to help us continue doing this work? That's one more gauge of whether what we're doing is resonating with them, right? Are those numbers increasing? Are they becoming sustaining members who say, I trust you to do this work in a way that makes me want to give you, $10 a month forever, or $50 a month forever? Those are other important gauges. Are we getting underwriting, right, to support it? So either we're doing work that's resonating with the communities we're trying to serve, and they're indicating it through their engagement with us and support of the work we're doing, or we're not, right? If we're having an event, are people showing up to it, right? How do we make their level of, and we do polling and seek feedback from folks who come to our events to understand what worked for them, what could have been better. We have an audience insights team that does the same thing, both with current listeners and supporters and people we hope to become listeners and supporters, right? So we spend a lot of time understanding what we're getting right, because you don't want to take that for granted and you don't want to stop doing it, as well as a fair amount of time trying to understand what would make us even more relevant and more valuable to people.
Did people resonate with that right away, or some people take a while to get on board with that?
I think everybody understands at least slices of it, right? Because to some degree, some of the folks are responsible, like their success is judged based on one or two of those lanes. What I'm really focused on in this role is making everyone see, understand, and care about all of those lanes.
Okay. Yeah, good. Well, the last one I'm really pleased to see here, because it's something we talk about all the time. So the third success habit is requiring equal time. And so the way I think about it is everybody's required to weigh in on team subjects so that we can create a shared sense of responsibility. So how do you think about it? Why do you think that's important? And then once again, how do you go about creating that?
Yeah, I want everyone to feel invested in all of the work. They may not all be experts in it. They don't all have to have, as much time to speak. We're not each going to take 5 minutes, right? But I want folks to be engaged, to be listening critically, to be thinking about the things that they're hearing that get them excited, and to speak that into the room. Like, this is a great idea, we should run hard at that, right? And I also want them to raise a hand if they're like, this doesn't make sense to me, I'm confused. Or have you thought about this? Or tell me more about that, right? There's a way to lean back or lean in when the discussion's happening. What I want with my teams is everyone to be leaning in, right? And if I've got an idea that you think is broken, I want you to tell me before I roll it out, right? I don't want you to be like, yeah, I saw that coming 6 months later. So much of what I'm trying to create is that comfort, right? Because that can be a little tense if you say something and I say, I don't think that's going to work, or have you thought about this in a way that comes across as critical? You can see that as my being invested in our success and in your success. You can see it as me trying to undermine you, right? And so a big part of the way I try to lead is just saying, when we do this isn't about any one person's ego, right? It's about us getting it right for our audiences, for our communities. And I don't want a single good idea to be left on the table. And I don't want even a question that you have that could help us make something better, sit in your head instead of out on the table. And I think it's coming along pretty well, just building that sense of comfort. Minnesotans, we can be afraid of conflict and sometimes indirect in our conversation. And so I'm not looking for blood sport, right? But I do want folks to be direct and timely with their thoughts and to accept it as a gift that someone cares enough about the work that you're leading, that you're more responsible for than they are, for them to say something.
Well, it's very common sense. Equal time helps create shared commitments, and shared commitments help people feel like they win together. But probably the most interesting thing from my chair is I've listened to people talk about their success habits for many, many years now, and they all seem very common sense. There's nothing whiz-bang about these ideas, but what's so fascinating is we seldom see other people do the common sense things. Right. So, we're just hoping that we can encourage people who are watching today to sit down and really think about bi-weekly meetings with structured agendas, outside-in metrics, and also requiring equal time around the table. We think that will help get better results faster and easier.
It's more fun, too.
Well, there you go. And that's a part of the Good Leadership Breakfast. We know that for sure. So before we go to the questions from the audience, it's a reminder, you still have time. You can submit questions into Chloe. Let's circle back to Chloe now, and I'm really curious to see you share the third survey question that we used.
Yeah, Duchesne, it's really inspiring to hear you talk about that equal time, especially. I think we've all been in positions where we watch an idea go out the door and we go, that's not going to work. And, then inevitably it doesn't work in the future. And so the idea of a team actively preventing that is really, really cool. I'm looking forward to asking you some audience questions soon. But as Paul mentioned, this is the third question in our pre-breakfast survey. How confident are you that your team will perform to expectations by the end of the year? And here are the results. Very confident, 48%, somewhat confident, 41%, and not very confident, 11%. So at first glance, Paul, it's encouraging to see that only 11% said not confident, but that does mean that more than half are somewhat or not very confident.
Yeah, well, it's a fact that the end of the year is only about 100 days from now. And if these were our client teams and they're only somewhat confident, we'd recommend that they meet more and not less. There needs to be a tighter cycle of accountability. The team needs to tighten their focus and make sure they're all focused on the same can't miss priorities, and then allocate the resources to make make sure that everyone has what they need to succeed. It's pretty basic, but it's really interesting to see that roughly half aren't sure. That's interesting to me. So we see the best teams actually create those shared commitments that we talked about so that people feel like they win together. And the sense of winning together really is at the heart of how we think about good leadership.
Yeah, it's really important, even if it's a little rare.
Yeah.
I want to remind our guests, this is the last chance you have to chat your questions for Duchesne. And I also am excited to remind you all about my favorite Good Leadership Breakfast tradition, the Bucket of Goodwill. Our partners at Handy Paint Pail are donating $1,500 to 360 Journalism, which was an organization selected by Duchesne. And on screen, you'll see the website and a QR code if you want to add to this donation. Duchesne, can you tell us why you chose this organization?
So 360 Journalism works with high school students with an interest in journalism and related fields. And while it's open to all students, it's primarily focused on trying to draw and support students of color into the field. And so, as you mentioned, I'm from New York. Most of the journalists of color in this market are from other places. And I'd love to see more kids who grow up here, who are kids of color, have a chance to tell the stories of this community too.
Yeah, well, very well said. And thank you to you in advance for everyone who contributes. So, Chloe, please share the first audience question you selected for Duchesne. I'm really curious to find out what's going on.
Yeah, there are a bunch of great ones, but here I'm really excited to start with this one. I think this is one that we all feel, not just people who work in journalism, but how do you maintain positivity in your team when the news cycle can feel so draining?
Great question. We talk about it, we can't pretend that we're not feeling these. We live here, right? So whether it's been the pandemic or the murder of George Floyd or, the fractious election cycle, we feel all of it. So we do spend some time talking about it. We also know that we're charged with helping our community make sense of it all, right? And we don't, some of it's heavy, but there's also hope woven into it as well, if we get it right, for people to understand that even in the darkest of times, which we've been through before as a nation, right? Good people step up and make things better. So I think we try to make sure that's part of how we approach our coverage. It certainly, for me, what gets me out of bed in the morning is knowing that I, with others, get to help shape how this community understands itself and what's possible.
Yeah, I can't imagine running the team without talking about how difficult some of these things are. They just seem like they never go away. You might want to wake up every day and say, I hope that I don't hear about this again today, but that never happens.
No, and you got to look for the silver linings too. There are good things and good people every day, and so I think that's an important dimension.
Certainly what we try to do here. What's next, Chloe?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in the title. All right, I'm excited about this next question. Given the social media and screen emphasis in today's culture, how does your enterprise strategize in captivating the listening time of people under 45 years old? Give or take.
We're working really hard at it. I think we're not as good at it today as we need to be, and so we're going to be in a year. But there are a lot of ways that people get their information, right, and their entertainment. And so we're trying to move in those social media channels in ways that make sense in those spaces. So, Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and Twitter and on, they're all actually very different one from another. So we're working at getting better understanding how to place our content and links back to our website, which is even more content, how to place it in those channels in ways that make sense, that feel like they belong there. And so that's skill building of folks we have. It's hiring people who come in with those skills. And it's being in conversation with community, right? Being in those spaces to understand, what do they care about? What are they talking about? What are they talking about that we should make sure our audiences are hearing about too, right? And what are we doing on the news or music stations that we should be dropping into those channels to make sure people know we've got something that they would find appealing.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm kind of longing for the days when I was just my phone and my newspaper and what I was getting in my email. Because it's all, I'm trying to keep up, but I'm not.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. So Chloe, what's your next question?
We've got one more, and we always end with a fun question. So Duchesne, you mentioned biking. What is the farthest you've biked in a day?
Jeez. I've gone over 50 miles a couple times, several times actually with friends. I just, as I said, I feel like I'm 12 again. Like I'm just sort of having the best day of the year when I'm out on a trail, especially if there's water around. And I just think we live in such a beautiful state. We got to get out and play in it.
Yeah, I have not gotten on to the biking thing, although many people in my family do. We have one woman in our firm you need to meet whose name is Mary. It's almost like she lives on her bike, so I'll figure out how we can make that happen.
I love that.
Yeah, okay. So we can't get to all of these questions, but we got several that we will revisit later. After the breakfast, I'll continue this conversation with you. I'll ask you some of those questions as we record the Goodness Pays Leadership podcast, which will be available later next week. So before we say goodbye, we always ask this one question of our speakers. We've been asking this consistently for many, many years now. And that question is, what evidence can you share with us that you know for sure goodness pays for you in your leadership?
I've got a fantastic life, professionally and personally, and I think it's a function of trying to consistently do the right thing as I understand it. I think it's a function of trying to build authentic, caring relationships, and I think it's a function of being an optimist. Like I always, I know people will disappoint now and then. I will disappoint others now and then, but for the most part, I expect things to work out if we're bringing the right kind of energy and spirit to our engagement, and that's been my experience.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was so drawn to you is you and I think both suffer from endless optimism. Yeah, and I think that's a good thing these days, particularly as we're trying to make sense of so many things. I'm always fascinated with how things seem to work themselves out.
And who wants to follow a leader who doesn't think you can do it?
Yeah,
that's not.
Very well said. Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's really been great. I've really enjoyed getting to know you personally and professionally, and we're grateful for your appearance here at the Good Leadership Breakfast.
Thank you, Paul.
So it's obvious to me why people love NPR, working there, and that's really, really important.
It's a great place.
Yeah, so now, Chloe?
I think it's me, Paul, right? Yeah, thank you so much, Duchesne. I really loved hearing you talk about leadership and being upfront and open, and that it's not about ego, it's just about putting out the best thing for the community.
Thank you.
So after hearing your success habits, it's fitting that we share the results to the final survey question we asked before today's breakfast, which is, assuming your team will perform to the goals for this year, what has the most value to you? Reaching the goals faster was 37%, reaching the goals cheaper was 21%, and the majority said reaching the goals easier, 42%. Paul, what do you see?
Well, I'm really glad we asked this question. It's consistent with the intuitive experiences that we have as executive coaches at Good Leadership. The answer easier is about working with less friction. People don't get exhausted from working too hard on things that are fun and rewarding. People burn out by solving the same problems over and over again, and by fighting the same turf battles over and over again. Those are the signals of the suffering that is caused by teams who are not aligned. And when we ask leaders, what would you do if you could get 6 or 8 hours back in your work week? Seldom does anyone say they would spend more time at work. When we create great results easier, we have more time for all the important things in our lives outside of work, and that's particularly important these days.
Paul, you've got me laughing over here with the what would we do with 6 more hours in our work week? Yeah, not spend time at the office. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I love this program, because we're willing to talk about stuff like that. So looking ahead, next month we'll interview Terry Rasmussen, President and CEO of Thrivent, and in November we interview Allison Rempel-Brown, President and CEO of the Science Museum of Minnesota, and I can't wait to listen in on those conversations. I'll see you all in October.
Yeah, thank you, Chloe. So before I sign off today, it's important we express our gratitude again for all the sponsors who helped keep this program alive during the pandemic. With your encouragement, we've continued to research the business benefits of how goodness pays and experiment with innovative coaching systems to help executive teams thrive together, even in a virtual environment. So now to close, let's return to the question I asked Duchesne about the dark noise. Even as the economy is booming right now from multiple stimulus packages, we continue to hear in the voices of employees a steady drumbeat of the dark noise. It's that negative, polarized dialogue in all channels of media that are really hard to avoid. We've all experienced tension in social settings and even in the workplace when people express strong, pointed opinions on opposite sides of the spectrum. It's exhausting. Our prediction at Good Leadership is that the dark noise will actually get worse as the weather begins to move people indoors, particularly this year. We have to embrace this fact that as employees, people in our community are losing trust in big business, government, organized religion, and the media. They're expecting to find more goodness in their workplace, whether that workplace is at the office or from home. As leaders, we need to make sure that the people who make up our teams are feeling like they're winning together and that they're thriving together both personally and professionally. Because goodness is when people thrive together in a culture of encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork. Anyone can work longer and harder to hit their goals. We saw in the data today shared that leaders actually want to hit their goals easier. So, over the next few months, if we expect to keep our best people engaged, we need to keep the teamwork positive. And we need to radiate goodness every day. If you want help finding that goodness in your team, reach out to me and we'll find a way to help. Because goodness pays when goodness grows, and good leadership is a team sport. Thanks to Duchesne today for being with us. We look forward to seeing you again in October. Carpe diem. Have a great day. Yeah, right.